if you understand the structure of the skeleton, you're going to be good at zombies, you're going to be good at creatures, you're going to be good at animals, because everything's the same basic structure. You've got your skull, spine, ribcage, pelvis, limbs hanging off them, basically. And if you understand those structures, if you're making something up, it's going to be so much more believable if you know those shapes really well.
We are in the car on our way to go have a chat with Amelia Rowcroft, an amazing sculptor, human being.
Yeah, she's. You check her out on Instagram. Amelia Rowcroft Sculpture is her handle, and it's interesting because I've been looking at her work for a while, and although I don't sculpt portraits, I was thinking about like the pure essence of sculpting versus like sculpting prosthetics, because when you sculpt a prosthetic, which is typically something I will sculpt, you've already got the life cast, so the lion's share of what you have to achieve is kind of there. You're just altering it slightly. But when you start from nothing, when you start from an armature,
full head, it's not,
or full
just
body,
a cheek piece or a nose.
No, but she'll do full bodies and stuff. She worked at Tussaud and stuff, so she's very, very skilled at that. I think there's a lot in that will be very useful for people looking to sculpt prosthetics. So I'm looking forward to being schooled and shamed as we go into a workshop and see the amazing stuff that's there. But this will be nice.
Hopefully gain some valuable tips on how to make our sculpture better.
I hope so.
Certainly for me. I am far from where I would like to be as a sculptor.
So you just got to keep working on it. I mean, one thing I thought was interesting was we were just talking there. That's why we suddenly thought, we should record this, because we had these conversations and then forget to record any. But the idea of like caricature, like, if you can see a caricature of somebody, if it's a bad caricature, that's at the point where you're presented with what is it that makes a caricature good? Because you could have 5 different artists do a caricature of someone well known, and you would recognize it, but they're all different. So what is the essence of it? And there's something in that, I think, with you were saying, like with regards to likeness sculptures, that's different, because it's not just a mechanical measuring and transposing of measurements. There's also an element of artistic flair and,
Perfect example is Malcolm McDowell's performance as Alex in A Clockwork Orange. He's got this little smirk that can't come from, probably to some extent it does, but that's not just a mechanical measurement.
No, that's a good one. I think we should come up with a slightly more up-to-date reference for our younger listeners. I'm a big Malcolm McDowell fan.
Fair enough.
Like if you were trying to get the charm across of, like, I don't know, Channing Tatum or something, which is actually a head that Amelia has sculpted. There's a certain look, there's a certain edge, and I think that's the beauty
Chris
of
Pratt from Guardians of the Galaxy.
Yes, exactly.
What is it that makes Chris Pratt recognizable from Chris Pine?
Yeah, but what I find interesting about sculpture versus saying just scanning somebody is it's not just about rendering an object realistically, it's what you bring to it. What is it that you change? What are you emphasizing, or what are you subverting in your decisions when you're making something? And that's very important, I think, with a makeup effect. If you're trying to do something, you're trying to emphasize some things and subdue others, or subvert others so they're not obvious. And it's those decisions, I think, is what makes it a creative act, rather than just being, an inefficient scanner. Because a scanner can scan someone and go, I know who that is. But that's not what we're talking about. We're talking about the act of rendering something from nothing to a realistic finished form that is recognizable to other people.
Well, you also mentioned caricatures, which I've seen some magnificent caricatures, and I've seen some horrible caricatures that doesn't look remotely like the person you're drawing. But a caricature is taking a likeness and exaggerating. It's working from those features of that person that do make that person, and exaggerating them. Like making a more elongated forehead, or bigger jawline, whatever it is that makes them, and emphasizing it, overemphasizing it, and it's still recognizable as that likeness.
Yeah. Cool. Well, I'm looking forward to it.
Stay tuned. We'll be back in a sec.
So let me just check your microphone level. What your microphone?
Testing. I'm number 1.
So
Amelia's
Am I
number 2.
You're number 2. What did you have for breakfast?
I had some toast and Marmite.
Perfect, that sounds good. See, Marmite.
Ding,
The
ding,
Marmite
ding.
thing. We were staying at this hotel.
This is never going to go away, is it?
No. He had like a blueberry muffin, and
Yeah.
you had a sachet of Marmite. And
Yeah,
I
and
thought...
I wasn't paying any attention. I thought I just picked up a little thing of butter, and I was reached in and started smearing it on there. I wasn't even looking at it. And Stuart, but I see Stuart's face, and his eyes just go huge.
What? No,
It's like,
not because I was trying to save you, because I thought you were doing some hideous, like anti-English, like no, we don't put Marmite with sweet things.
Well, I was, and I'm thanking you for saving my life.
I didn't realize you didn't know. I thought it was some horrible, like when you put like
No, I thought
peanut butter and
I
jelly
was
together.
just smearing butter on there. I said, why are you lunging out? That,
Yeah, and it was like tar. Because if you don't know what Marmite is, it's quite a shock.
Oh no, I had an American boyfriend once, and he came over, and he'd never seen Marmite, and he said, "Oh, what's it like?" I said, "It's really nice." He put it all over his toast, but he thought it was like a chocolate spread.
I can see how it would be nice on some
Laying
things.
it
Who
on.
was it
Horrified.
that said it was great on roast potatoes?
It's lovely walking around. This is what you don't get, I think, with ZBrush. Is you don't get to see the things that you've made around you.
No.
The artifacts of
And
sculpt.
to print all this stuff out would take millennia.
Yeah.
Do you not print out everything that you make then?
No, most
They
of
do
what I'm
look
doing in
fancy.
ZBrush are just learning exercises that nobody wants to memorialize physically.
Yeah. And normally I'm just trying to make things happen and see where I go wrong. So I'm not happy with what I've done.
See how long it takes him to get angry.
Yeah, doesn't take long.
Why doesn't it do it?
But I will get past that. It's my thing.
And I'll bet you will, at some point during this conversation it will crop up as, why can't the subtool you selected be more obvious?
Well, I think the thing about that is because you become so distracted by what ZBrush is, you're not thinking about sculpture at all. Whereas there's none of that with clay, I don't think. It's a very direct
No, it's
medium.
always obvious what tool you've selected.
Yeah. Whereas with clay, it's just that hand. What I will say about ZBrush, I think, is very good for sculpting, is that you are forced to worry about primary form and position and things early because you can't sculpt detail on something that's only got 100 polygons on it.
Right.
So that's
right.
quite nice. That's quite nice, and you can skip between the lower resolution and the higher resolution while you're sculpting. But
Whereas with clay, it is always at full resolution.
But it's still sculpting, really, and that's the thing I think that's important. And what I have seen when I've seen visual effects people who are familiar with the software, but they're not sculptors. Do you know what I mean? You can kind of see there's no. That's a huge generalization.
There's no,
do you know what I mean?
There's no foundation there.
Yeah.
Because you can get into ZBrush without ever having any work in any kind of physical medium, whether it's Play-Doh as a kid or Sculpey or any of the polymer clays or water clay or or monster clay.
Yeah.
And get great results. But I think having had experience with a real physical medium is going to make you a better sculptor digitally.
Oh, and you have symmetry, so you sculpt one side, your good
Oh,
side,
handy.
the other
Yeah,
side sculpting,
yeah.
and that's a bit of a no-no with sculpture, isn't it? The whole point is to be able to do it on both sides. But then you get angles and stuff, so there's no symmetry now.
Great for doing handed stuff though. Like when I used to do films, would have to do one sculpt and then the mirror image.
Yeah.
So I guess now they just scan it.
That I think is the inevitability of it, because especially for productions, because it's efficient, especially if you're a practiced, a well experienced practitioner, the efficiencies of it are a no-brainer. So it's going to become prevalent in film and TV. But I'd like to make it more part of my practice. But it also has hard edge modeling aspects to it. Like
That's
Z-modeler.
really, really good to get a feel of machined edge.
So if you're making
with a hard
guns or
surface
weapons,
modeling.
or you're doing a cyborg or something that's part
Space
human,
suits.
part, you
Yeah.
can do it all in ZBrush. But I'm not qualified enough to comment.
No, I'm barely competent doing organic things, let alone hard surface modeling. That's
Yeah.
I'll have to be patient. That's coming later.
So we want to talk about sculpture.
Yeah, and we are here with Amelia Rowcroft in her fabulous studio.
It is glorious. I'm just looking at all the things that are around. So we had a look at your your foundation sculpting.
Yes, thank you so much for letting us
have a little look at that.
It's really, really cool.
We'll put links to that in the podcast description so people can check that out. And it's weird because we were saying about something that we had mentioned before and I'd forgotten, but that we'd both gone to Wimbledon School of Art as it was then. I think it's College of Art now.
Yeah, I think it's part of the University of London umbrella.
Yes, there's like a whole association of colleges. And our slightly different experience of things, because when I was at that college, a tutor of mine, Val Charlton, and she took us through life. So we did, the first year was a lot of life drawing and things, and then I think in the end of the first year we did a head portrait of a girl called Camille, or Camilla, I can't remember which, and that was just in clay. Then we moulded it in plaster, and we made a plaster positive out of it, so it was a waste mould. And then we did the same thing again with a guy, I can't remember his name, but it was a full-size naked figure. Yeah. And I remember very distinctly things happening in my brain where I was like, oh, the shoulder becomes the arm, becomes the elbow. There isn't like a one thing becomes the next. And you were having to deal with the mechanics of the armature and then the surface, and they were different things. So there was a point where you had to be very clinical and measury and making sure, and then there's a point where you can't lean on that. You've now got to start making decisions which are sort of things you can't measure, like maybe this cheek's a bit baggy than that one, and that's not something that caliper's necessarily going to tell you or something. But
yeah, that's where your eye comes in.
Yeah. So how did you get started with sculpture? What was your...
Well, so I also went to Wimbledon. I was 3 years behind you, I think. So I was 98, I graduated. But yeah, by that time, I think Val was leaving, and we ended up just copying a life cast, which was kind of frustrating because it's not the same as sculpting a real person. And then we did sculpt a big figure as well. And I definitely loved it, but I felt like I didn't feel equipped after that to then go on and know how to do it on my own or feel confident about it. So I ended up then working on films, just doing kind of anything I could get, like kind of set dressing or props or polybashing.
Was working on film one of your goals?
Yeah, I always wanted to work on films, but I got into more like the construction side of things rather than prosthetics. And then I kind of just kept coming back to this thing of sculpting people is what I really wanted to do. And I found out about this school called the Florence Academy of Art in Italy, and I managed to get out there, and I spent 2 years there.
Wow.
Which was amazing. And it was just working from life all the time, studying anatomy, like really learning it properly. And I just totally got the bug then. I was just like, all I want to do is sculpt people. And then I managed to get in at Madame Tussaud, and I worked there for quite a long time. And I still used to do a bit of film work and that, but then since I've had my studio, I just do wax portraits, really.
Do you have a particular Italian sculptor that you think people should become familiar with?
Please say Bernini, please say Bernini.
I was going to say Bernini.
Please say Bernini.
I knew it.
Yeah, if you ever get to go to the Borghese, do it. He's like a god.
Yeah.
Yeah.
That must be amazing. What a time if you wanted a sculpt to be there.
It
in that place.
was absolutely brilliant. It's like the best thing I've ever done. I feel so lucky to have done it. And that is partly why I wanted to do the online courses, because I felt like I've been so fluky. And what's the point of learning all this stuff if you're just going to keep it to yourself and not explain it to anybody else? And I'm not kind of a natural teacher. I get quite embarrassed standing up in front of people. But if you're just making a video I just do them with my husband Ben, so he's filming and I'm talking, and then I feel more comfortable to kind of share everything that I've got going on in my head.
They are beautifully made, and also they're structured in a very logical way. They're little bite-sized lessons, and they're not. You don't feel overwhelmed at any point because it's step by step by step, and then there's a logical progression from next to the next to the next, which is really good.
We were going through some of the introductory lessons last night together, sitting at my laptop, and the lesson would end, and we just look at each other and go, our mouths would just drop.
Yeah, it's amazing.
Oh, it's really nice. They take absolutely ages. It's a real passion. I just love thinking about the best way of conveying this information, and I'm always just thinking, like, when I left college and I was like, I love sculpting, but I don't know how to do it on my own. No, I was living in shared houses and stuff, and I'd try and sculpt something on a desk in my bedroom and just be like, I don't really know what I'm doing. And I just thought, if I could teach me then, what was it that I would have wanted to know? And I just thought, right, we're going to do portrait, figure, anatomy. really as simply put as possible. Just try and really get across the information clearly and actually make it so that you can do the project on your own at home. So the head one, you've got all the information, you've got all the photos and measurements, so you can actually sculpt our model. Same with the figure. And with the anatomy one, there's loads of pictures of the models, so you can actually kind of like, what I recommend is you get some tracing paper, put it over the pictures, and get your anatomy book and draw on the muscles and bones, and that's how you understand it.
Yeah,
So it's literally just the exercise of drawing it over and over and over again brings it into muscle memory.
Yeah.
So that when you are now going to clay,
it doesn't even have to be like really detailed, but if you just understand the main structure of, if you understand the structure of the skeleton, you're going to be good at zombies, you're going to be good at creatures, you're going to be good at animals, because everything's the same basic structure. You've got your skull, spine, ribcage, pelvis, limbs hanging off them, basically. And if you understand those structures, if you're making something up, it's going to be so much more believable if you know those shapes really well.
Yes.
And it's just in your head.
Yes.
And even with animals, we were talking about this up at Bolton, where, about character design, everything still comes from a foundation of real anatomy, to be able to rotate your hand like this. And I'm rotating my hand side to side
for the benefit of the court.
because there are two bones at the bottom. The way the muscles insert at the bone ends are the same, whether it's a fox, a cat, a human, male, female, an ogre, a troll.
Yeah.
The movement's all going to be the same, even if the bones ultimately elongate, so you have a really long forearm. And it comes from that foundation of reality. It still has to feel authentic.
I think that's where the confusion comes when you start sculpting, is because obviously you see the surface, but obviously the surface is informed by what's underneath it. So you have to, like you say, understand it from that bones up to be able to render the surface. And I think a lot of people starting out see the surface and they try and replicate without, like you say, knowing what's underneath. And you kind of need to know that in order to do it well.
It looks close, but it's not. It's not there. It's not real.
It's hard also to define specifically why something's wrong, because you can spot something's wrong, but you don't know why it's off, especially with makeups as well. It's like, is it the colour? Is it the shape? It could be something you can't put your finger on. And one of the things I really liked about your lessons where you were showing like how you measured like to the chin from here, and it's like, you go from the bone, because that's a fixed thing that you can feel, but obviously the chin extends out. So there's that mechanical
and it's going to be a
process.
little bit different because you're informed by your reference images, because somebody if you're doing a sculpture, something that's morbidly obese, there's going to be more tissue.
Yeah.
But the skull's the same,
bone,
so you still need to know.
The skull is the same, exactly.
Yeah.
I always find it really mad when I've seen online, people sometimes sell these skulls for you to sculpt a likeness onto, and it's like, that makes no sense. Because everyone's skull is a different shape.
Yes, that's why
you're not going to be able
you
to get a good likeness sculpting onto some ready-made skull. Like, that's never going to work. It's like that movie Face Off, where Nicolas Cage and John Travolta, hilariously the most two different shaped faces you could ever get. The most different shaped skulls underneath. Just put their face over each other and just look like the other person.
Yeah. That'll work.
I love the ludicrousness of that film. You couldn't have cast two more wrong people.
Yeah, that's a really funny point, actually. But from a effectsy point of view, like, oh yeah, but that's the thing, isn't it?
If they had the same shaped face,
theoretically, more believable.
It could be done. But when if somebody's got really close eyes and somebody's got really wide set eyes, and
a really narrow face and a really wide face,
not going to work.
Yeah. So there's that whole thing, and I remember as well with life drawing that there seemed to be those two phases of drawing. One was like plotting; you'd measure and use plumb lines, and the shoulder is slightly above the hip, and by how much and all that, depending obviously where you move, obviously it can change, but with a physical shape it's the same. But so there's there's something quite nice about having the mechanics of plotting things and marking them.
And we also have these wonderful built-in landmarks, with the distance between the eyes and
fixtures that
the fixtures that are there, that where the tragus is versus how it's all these things that are fixed that you can tell if something's as a foundational point to start from. If those are right, then your chances for success improve. But if they're not, then
amazing.
It's just so many like anatomical sort of facts or checkers that you can, also if you know them, it's just gonna, if you're making something up, it's just so much easier to make it believable.
Right.
Like, you know, for instance, if you look at a skull from the side, the bottom of the skull will line up with the bottom of the cheekbones, will line up with the bottom of the nose, and you know, it's easy to get those things wrong. Or, you know, the ear hole is halfway between the front and the back of the head. They're just easy checkpoints, and if you know them, then you're on the right track, kind of thing.
Gotcha. Yeah.
Like for me, like when I learnt anatomy, it was like, oh my god, because it sounds like, oh, a really boring kind of subject. I just want to get on with the fun stuff of sculpting. But when this stuff is in your brain, it actually makes the sculpting, you can just lose yourself in the sculpting easier, because you know that your proportions are okay, and you know, you can cut to the fun bit quicker, kind of thing.
I think that's the thing. And watching you like block out that head, it reminded me, because I haven't sculpted a head since, like, Christ, a full head like that was probably at college, because most of the stuff I do is prosthetics. But it was that thing of like, you start with an armature and it's a shape and you hope it's right. I mean, with a head, not so bad, but with a body, it's perfectly possible the elbow could be too far forward and you won't know till you've covered it in clay and you've got to cut it and re-weld it back. But the fact that you're able to sort of rely on these fixtures, like, right, first measure this, plot that, make that. And once you've got this kind of framework of sort of decisions, which are not opinions, they're factually correct, and you've got that board with measurements on that you've taken with calipers, then there's a sort of part of you, I guess, that's relieved of that now. Now you just need to check it, but now you're freed up a bit to start making decisions.
Saves time. But like when I was in Italy, they were really anti-measuring. Everything was by eye.
Really?
Yeah, which is really hardcore.
Oh my god!
we were.
But it trains your eye to see more accurately.
Taranti sell the calipers.
I don't know if it's still like that now, but the guy that was running it when I was there, he's moved on now. But it was all just trying to.
So it's pure judgment.
Yeah, just judgment.
Oh my god.
So yeah,
that's terrifying.
Well, we were just fascinating over when looking at Bernini's stuff and looking at some of the intricate lace that was sculpted and up the folds of lace fabric that goes up and it's like, and this is subtractive sculpture. And it's
I know.
Like, yeah, but you know what's weird about that?
I think he does it he used to do it in clay first though, because I remember in one of the museums there was like I don't know if you know the Rape of the Sabine. It's like the famous 3-figure composition. But the clay, the plaster cast of the clay is in one of the museums, can't remember which one. So I think that he used to sculpt it and then measure off that to do the marble, I think. It's my understanding, but I don't really know.
But still, the process of creating that, you know, that's, I want to be able to time travel. You know, that's one of the things I would like to go back and be able to just be that unseen observer and watch that happen.
But weirdly, that stuff doesn't get me as... I mean, it's impressive to look at, but I don't think I'd be interested in sculpting, because I'm like you. I think there's something about the person. Maybe, you know, a cursory bit of clothing to acknowledge that they're wearing something, but I'm not interested in rendering cloth.
I'm a closet costumer.
Oh, okay, yeah, so you'd like all that. And it would, you know, adds a lot to it. But I'm really interested in this judgment thing, like you say, because I had no idea that was the case. Is that in order to engender a very, very strong ability to spot things?
I don't know how to describe it. I think it's to stop you relying on it, for one thing. It is the best way to train your eye, because you learn to just be totally sure of your own judgment, which is the best thing that you can do. But also I think they just felt like it becomes then too sort of tawdry and like a crutch, but also not artistic somehow, you know, like sort of too mechanical or not imaginative but creative, you know.
Well, that was one of the things we were talking about briefly in the car on the way down here. There's the mechanical aspect of getting accurate measurements, but if you're doing a likeness and the particular subject has a little bit of a smirk, or just the way they have an eyebrow for a particular expression that helps identify that person. You know, what makes Chris Pratt recognizable from Chris Pine, or you know, how do you define Harrison Ford versus Morgan Freeman, or you know, just what makes them them? It's beyond mechanical measurements.
It's a really fine line, I always think, between, because like when you're doing likeness, you do have to measure loads. That is a given. You know, when I do the waxworks, it's all like you have a front-on picture that you're measuring from. But you also have to be confident of your judgment, because you can't measure depths. You know, you can have something that looks great from the front, but if the eyes are too far forward or too far back, or it doesn't look right in 3/4 angle, then it's not going to look right in the round.
And that's an interesting junction in your brain, because I also remember measuring things. You'd be like, the measurements are correct, but it is not looking right. And there's that gap. Is that, well,
that's what I was thinking. If it looks wrong, it is wrong.
Yeah.
Like, you have to be confident enough to say, I'm going to override what the measurements are telling me and go with what looks right. And then you often find that actually then further down you remeasure it and it is the right measurements, but somehow through some weird thing you've changed it from the measurements being allegedly right, and then it still works measurement wise once you've changed it.
Yeah, it's sorcery.
It is. These are things that go through my mind all the time on my own, just like, oh, that's weird. Oh, why? How is that measuring right now? I don't understand it, but yeah.
Amazing. I see you got a head open there. So you work in water-based clay.
Yeah.
So, I mean, this country's quite good for that, isn't it? The whole Stoke and Staffordshire, we have a lot of pottery clay. That whole, I guess that's where most of it comes from. Like,
and you have humidity.
And we have humidity. Yeah, I was thinking about this with clay.
Where I work, at my home, our ambient humidity is about 20%.
Right. I don't know what that means.
I don't either.
It's very low.
Right.
Does that mean it just dries out really quick?
Things dry out.
Yeah.
So this is why I think wet clay.
Italy.
I think that's why wet clay's big in the States, because of that.
because it has glycerin in it, so it doesn't dry out.
And a lot of people here get excited because they get wet clay. It's kind of I don't need it because it's damp mostly. So it won't be, and there's no AC here really. So it's like, it's very cool. And I see you recycling your clay, which I think is a good thing for all colleges to kind of.
Yeah.
That's quite an impressive thing to do.
And I don't know that a lot of people are teaching you how to recycle your
no
clay.
I mean, I think they're like pottery schools, they do, the pugs and all that kind of stuff are doing it, but it's not something.
But ceramics is a different discipline.
It is, but I mean, they have the facilities to do it, but you might have 50 people sculpting in a makeup college, and I don't know if they recycle that. I mean, you do to a degree, but it's not.
Well, prosthetic sculpture is largely
oil-based
waxed
stuff.
and oil-based clay instead of water, because of the thinness of the edges.
Do you recycle that generally? Because you can.
Yes, you can, because it melts, so
Yeah.
you can pour it through a sieve and then collect.
And I've got tubs of monster clay that I've been sculpting out of the same bin for years.
Yeah.
That's amazing.
Every now and then you have to pick out a chunk of ultracal or plaster out of it. Or silicone.
Yeah, mine has a lot of dog hairs in it. I do have to, from time to time, just be like, right, enough, I'm going to get some new stuff.
Amazing. So what you've got there is you've got a head sculpt, and there's that frame, the armature that's based on, so you can just reuse that.
Yeah, I just reuse all my armatures and clay.
It's quite a sturdy armature too.
Yeah, well, this is the thing. I think armature building is very important. That's one of the things I really liked about your course, was like you're not skimming over things like a solid armature. It's not just a bit of tape over some foil or something. It's like, no, this needs to be strong enough to withstand. Once it's got like 15 kilos or 20 kilos of clay in it, you might be putting it around and it needs to withstand all that.
Oh yeah, I remember saying to you that when you were still fleshing out, just putting clay in and around the armature, you really hadn't. You'd started doing some angle measurements at the neck and chin, looking for, but it was still narrowed out. So you were getting the profile before you started fleshing out the width, and before there was any even semblance of a human head taking shape yet. It looked like you already had about 25 pounds of clay.
Yeah, you want to get all your clay on really quick, and then
They start bullying it around because it's there to be.
Yeah, I'm always really impatient. I want to get all the clay on and then look at it.
Yeah, that's the thing. Yeah, once it's there. So, is there any particular kind of thing you like to sculpt, or you just like to get the person? Is it just a? I mean, there is something I think that happens when you sculpt something. You kind of interact. It sounds a bit airy-fairy, but you know what I mean. You sort of you're seeing it as a person, so you're trying to bring that out.
Yeah,
and it's a fascinating.
You want to get a sense of the personality, not just the physicality of it.
Yeah.
I definitely, enjoy, because I'm sculpting portraits all the time. Like I'll have a list and I'm just working my way through it. And some of them,
that's
especially
a nice list.
now as I get older, I'm like, I don't even know who this is. Like if it's a pop star or something, and I definitely enjoy the ones when I know them.
Yeah.
Better, because like you say, then you're like pulling out the personality and getting into it. Or if it's someone that I like, it's quite difficult when it's someone that you actually really dislike, or you think that they're probably quite a horrible person.
this is the thing, because and then there's that interaction with them as if it's not that you think that they're a person, but I mean there is that interaction with their image. That's why I think sculpture is so important, because it affects it can evoke something in you.
Yeah.
Like at the prosthetics event, I can't remember who was it that did the figure of
the Rembrandt
figure.
Yeah, that was one of the last year's MA graduates from Falmouth.
Can you remember who that was? She's the one that was organising the
Magda.
That's it.
Yeah, she's sorry, Magda. I think she's Polish.
Right, and she'd done this full-size figure of Rembrandt painting.
Wow. Like
doing a
life-size.
self-portrait.
So in silicone with the eyes and everything.
wow.
So the figure is in a pose. There's an easel with a picture of Rembrandt and a mirror, and
Oh, cool.
it's beautiful.
But
Wow.
but it took me back to when I was a kid, when I was 12 and went to see Madame Tussaud, and seeing the things that are wax figures, but if there's something from history, or like the I don't know if they still have the Chamber of Horrors where they had Christie and all these kind of creepy figures. There was something that sort of happened as if a little bit as if they were really there, and especially as a child. And I remember being quite, and I think that was one of the formative experiences that wanted me to work in arts and create physical things that look like people, because it's a weird thing when that happens.
Yes, I have to thank you, Stuart. You're bringing back some traumatic experiences of my first visit to Madame Tussaud's museum when I was a kid in the Hall of Horrors. That scared the shit out of me. Thank you very much.
Sorry about that. I loved it.
I loved it. I loved Madame Tussaud when I was a kid.
Yeah, and I'm fascinated by the process of creating those wax likenesses. And just the literal casting process of
Can you talk about that, or is that
I only do the sculpting, so I don't really.
You just hand that over to them.
I just hand it over to the mould maker, and then the guy that I work with, he project manages all the other processes involved, because there are a lot of people involved in a finished figure.
Sure.
You've got the mould maker, hair inserters, painters, eyeball makers, teeth makers, costume, life casting or figure sculpting, whatever.
Yeah.
And
there's
so many
all that
processes.
together and posing it correctly.
It's a big thing to undertake. I just sculpt the heads. Oh, sometimes I sculpt the whole figure. I have done quite a few life-size figures in here. That's fun.
What gives you the most personal challenge? Hands, faces?
Well, with the wax figures, they always have life cast hands, and the feet are just like little flippers that go inside shoes. But when I'm
exactly
sculpting,
what I have, actually.
when I'm doing my own stuff, hands are always a bit of a challenge, and I think the main difficult thing is just getting it to work from every angle, because it's, especially when you're working from like a model, because they do move, it's inevitable. So if you're working from photos, you have to understand the structure of what you're sculpting to work out what's moved in different photos. I always think it's a bit like a sort of nerdy puzzle, sculpting generally, because you're always just trying to make it work, and all you're thinking all the time is what's wrong. So it's quite hard to ever feel really happy with anything, because all you can really see is what's wrong all the time.
Yeah, that's a good point. I think a lot of people will see creative things on places like Instagram, and they get like a very edited highlights of things, and no one's really, which is precisely why I like doing this kind of podcast, is no one's really dwelling on the difficulty involved in getting to that
you're just seeing
point.
the finished result that may have been many failed attempts in between before they finally get it to where it is. And it can be daunting for people that are having, as artists, we all doubt our abilities and think our work sucks, and you see these other magnificent things on
Totally,
and think, oh my God, I'm never gonna.
That's
why
a
do
good
I
point.
even try?
Like you said, you're looking for things that what's wrong, and that's precisely why you get better. But it also means your vision is filled with the things you've done wrong.
Yeah,
you kind of don't really. Do you know what I mean? As soon as you've solved one problem, you replace it with the next one. So you always feel like, oh, I'm always, not right. But
she was actually a really challenging one, this one, because she died in the 90s.
No.
So that just means that there's way less photos, good quality photos, than someone that's like a contemporary person.
Yeah.
And there's lots of things like dodgy 90s Photoshop on some of the pictures, and
Right.
there's not going to be any nice juicy digital paparazzi pictures of her out and about from the side angles, and that. They're all just kind of like front on photo shoots. So it's a tricky one, that one.
Do you think when you've got things like these, all these pictures here are just, they're all from very similar angles, but there's some different ones and obviously different poses and different things, that because you have the variety of looks, like there's a profile there where she's not smiling, and then the head is tilted back, that kind of informs you as to what the crucial unique things are, in a way where, as if you had like a photo session like of one person in one sitting, that's just them. That, do you know what I mean? You see them a year later at a slightly different view, it kind of fleshes out, their lip kind of does that, and you suggest that in the...
That is true, like, because often as well you have people at different ages, and you're like, when they're young, they've sort of got the beginnings of that wrinkle or crease there, and then when they're older, it definitely became that. So if you're sculpting them younger, you can kind of know to put in the beginnings of those forms before they've turned into a great big crease down their face. But I mean, when you're doing an expression, I just get as many pictures as I can of as close as possible to expression. But like you say, sometimes, with a smiling one, you'd often only have a profile of them not smiling. And you have to kind of guess what that would be doing from the side. But there's other information, like all the photos have something that's useful in it. So, ones from the side, you can really see where the ear is, how far back the ear is on the head. And because that ear placement is one of those things that's really hard to gauge. If you haven't got any profile pictures, it's really kind of impossible, because that affects all your depths as well.
Yes.
Because if you put the ear too far forwards, you end up with everything too far forwards. And if it's too far back, then you have these weird sort of like windswept face, aerodynamic face. So quite often you just have to slice the ear off and just be brutal and move it, Yeah,
it's quite a brutal move. Val would do that. She'd just carve into things, but you have to divorce yourself from that.
It's so easy though to just be like, I can make it work, I can't be bothered, like I'm not going, like, you just have to always be really strict with yourself and be like, if it's not working, just move it, because you'll never be pleased with it if you know really a nagging thing in the back of your mind that something's wrong.
Yeah. It hurts though when it's beautifully sculpted in the wrong place.
And that means that the armature has got to be right beforehand. I've had students that are sculpting on that has ears on it, and because they're putting clay on something that already has ears, they're forced to work around it, and it's restrictive because they can't put their ears anywhere else, and then it changes the shape of the head. Yeah,
and it's tricky because there's two of them, and one can be wrong, and so you think you correct it, and now that one looks wrong. So it's just,
whittle it away to nothing.
Yeah, it could be another. Do you still use like cocktail sticks? We at college they had us use cocktail sticks.
I was just put screw in the tragus.
Gotcha.
But that's all. Everything else I just sort of draw it on.
Screw in the tragus. That'd be a great name for a band.
Yeah. Oh wow. Yeah, that's a weird thing, and the other thing, like how far forward the ears are. Because I know when we do live casts, we'll photograph people from above and from the side, because obviously you might get the eyes are level, but one wheel is, and you got to know, is it my live cast that's off? Have I distorted it, or have they just got a freakishly off? Because everyone's a little bit off, but you want to know by how much. And I guess it's easy to kind of play on that too much. How long do you have to sculpt? Do you set yourself a time limit, or is this time limit applied set to you?
Well, I mean, when we were at Madame Tussaud, it was always 5 weeks for a head, so I always allow that. But now that I'm just working on my own, they generally take about 3 weeks, I'd say.
Right.
Sometimes less, but it's because it's such a different setup now, because I'm just on my own sculpting all day, every day, and I've got any meetings.
You've been doing it long enough.
And I've been doing it for like 20 years, so it's, or maybe not quite that long, quite a long time.
Time goes by quick, though.
It does. But yeah, you get quicker, definitely.
Yeah.
But they all have their own challenges.
We also have your models in some wonderful poses too.
So like alongside my waxwork
expressive
stuff,
poses.
I do like to just have what I think of as just like my hobby sculpting as well.
I love this series up along the top. I also love that the hairstyles are.
Oh, thanks.
So do you come up with those gestures? Because I would be useless at knowing how to make. I don't know. I look at those and I go, they they look like gestures designed to produce very interesting sculpts.
They're dramatic, but they're natural.
Do you know what I mean? Is that a clumsy way of saying it? Do you like to render something that I can't even speak? But do you know what I mean? Is it a case of like trying to make the anatomy?
Trying to find a pose.
You're trying to show off an arm. But if I put an arm here, it looks more interesting than here. Or
I generally just kind of like look at art books and stuff and think about what poses I like and what would probably work well in the round. Like sometimes I'll look at an illustration or something. I love kind of early 1900s illustrations. I'll get a model in and work with them, and you know, if you're working with a good model, they'll suggest things and you just come up with something together, kind of thing.
Yeah, I see these ones are painted as well. So is that something you like to do? Because I always hated the idea of painting things.
Testers, yeah. They're just Jesmonite with bits of pigment in.
All right.
Yeah, I was just sort of messing about because they're just bits out of a mould. You can kind of mix up different mixes, you know, add a little bit of one pigment or another pigment and sort of dab it in so that you get like a mottled effect. It's quite cool.
Nice.
Do you have a favourite mould material that you like to work with?
I just use Jesmonite because I'm in this shared building. I don't like to do anything too smelly.
Yeah, Jesmonite's that acrylic.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, it's like
it's fantastic. It's really good.
Yeah, it's like acrylic base. It's sort of cross between plaster and resin. But yeah, I like it. I use it
like
for all
our
my mould jackets.
our Forton.
Exactly. Yeah, very similar. An acrylic one, I think, in Scandinavia, it's a similar kind of thing. But like you say, you can make pretty good things with it. It doesn't stink that.
Yeah.
Gypsum with some kind of resin in it.
Yeah, it's like two parts. So it's plaster. Well, there's that actually. There's the powder and the liquid, and
just like Forton.
You just mix it up, and and you can lay it up with glass matting as well. So it's really good for mould jackets and all sorts.
Amazing, quite prolific. I mean, just the amount of things. Are these little bronzes or are they painted bronze colour? These figures?
They're just bronze resin little things. They're all just things I do in between doing the waxworks, just to have a bit of variety.
I think that's interesting though that you just keep. I mean, that is one of the things about sculpting. I think, like a muscle, you got to keep working it, and it seems like you know. That's exactly what you do, and I think that's a very important thing to take note when you want to pursue something. It's kind of like you really need to want to do it.
Yeah.
If you want to do it to a degree.
You've got to be obsessed with it.
Well, you're inspiring me to get home and
it feels shameful to dabble in sculpture, doesn't it? It feels like get out, stop. Yeah. If you're not going to do it 10 hours a day, you shouldn't even start. But it's like it's quite amazing to see. You know, it's refreshing actually.
Yeah.
The thing is, when you're working though, you don't have any time, do you? You know, if you're doing film work, you're doing 12 hours a day and you're driving loads. You don't have any time to do anything else.
But this is the thing. I can do what I want to do competently for my job, but I know it belongs to something bigger that I should really do. It's almost like, do you know what I mean? It feels like a dereliction of duty to sort of do something, you know, for films when you know that belongs to something that could be.
Well, see, if you took the train more often, you could get better at ZBrush.
Maybe
because you're not driving and yelling at stupid drivers.
Yeah, it's
you could sit on the train and work on ZBrush and yell at the software.
I'll do that instead. But yeah, no, there's something about that amount of working where you, like you say, you get a familiarity to it, and you get that kind of stuff out of the way, and then it's a well-oiled machine that's kind of humming all the time, and then you can really, you know, jump on, because you're going to do the same kinds of things, like make an armchair, pack it in, get the measurements in. It always becomes like a kind of a routine. So you can get to the sculpture part, which is the judgment, decision making. And one thing I've noticed, and you mentioned it with the ears as well, is that there can be a reluctance to want to do it in a weird kind of way.
Oh,
like,
yeah.
You find yourself sculpting,
always
being like,
fighting that. Yeah.
Which is a horrible thing, and I guess it's because you've invested time in something like the beautifully sculpted but incorrectly positioned ear. It's like no, and you might be able to slice it and move it, but it might, you know, get damaged away. So you should just be quite happy to just like, well, whatever, and just slap it around and
I don't want to move it. The helix is perfect.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Amazing.
You just have to be strict with yourself. I always think that you just got to focus on the structure early on and not get sucked into those juicy details till you know that it's going to be sitting on solid ground, or you'll regret it because you'll have to move it.
Have you ever tried doing one of your puppies?
No, I can't do animals.
They don't keep still enough, shouldn't they?
Just not able to do animals. I once on Game of Thrones, someone gave me a dire wolf to do, and I started doing. They were like, "No, go back and do a person." It's absolutely rubbish.
Well, that's interesting to hear, because it's that kind of thing where if people see the work, it's like you might be good at something, but it's something you like doing, and then you don't enjoy something else, and that's all right. You know, you could be good at, like, the idea of sculpting hair is like something I've already had to do, but obviously with beards and hair, that's quite an important thing.
Oh yeah, I hate
Can we talk about hair?
Oh, I hate
Help
hair.
me with hair, Amelia. How do you sculpt hair? It's not something you can...
I don't do it very often, because with the waxworks, of course, they're always, you've
Of
got to
course,
take the
yeah.
hair off. They're moulded bold, so I just sketch it in. You know, it's only to help with the lightness, but also to help with all the bits around the edges, because...
Well, I see you've got a few busts over here with some extensive facial hair.
Yeah.
And some,
I mean,
you know,
I
to
do
to
it. You can't only sculpt bald
But
people.
are there any tips you can offer to? Because I've had students at both Falmouth and Bolton say, "What about sculpting hair?" I know there are some brushes that brush packages you can get that work in ZBrush, but you know that doesn't work with clay.
I think what I'd say is try and just look at it. If you're sculpting a likeness of someone, just try and look at it in exactly the same detached way that you're looking at the shapes on the face, and just look at the masses, and just think about the masses first of all before you even think about the direction of the strands of hair or anything like that, and try to remember that it's growing out of the skin. Like, you don't want like a hard edge where it's coming out of your face, even though to start off with you want to know where that hairline is, because it's going to help you to know how much structure there is around the edges of the face. But once you've got that solid, then make sure it's blending into the main body of the hair. But I don't have any magic answers. I find hair really difficult.
I think what you were saying about hair is the same thing as we were saying about the surface of the skin. It's like you see the strands of hair, but as you say, you've got to sort of step back. You see it as a shape.
Whole, as
Try and simplify it into a shape.
Individual hairs.
Which weirdly ZBrush would do quite well, because it sees it as like if you had scanned somebody and you reduce that topology, it would be, although hair doesn't show up very well in scans, I know, but you sort of see shapes as a simple thing. So in a weird kind of way, that can help you to find the edge of that paper, do you know what I mean? To pick at it, to be able to get a hold of it, maybe. But yeah, like you say, you just got to try. Do it wrong.
Yeah, it'll
analyze why it's wrong and try again.
Yeah, it'll either look right or it won't.
Yeah, I mean, at least it's not carving into marble. I mean, I can't even imagine how.
Yeah. Oops.
Oh, I know.
How you even begin to do that? Yeah. It's quite
How do you deal with a mistake in marble?
But then I guess you believe it can be done because you've seen it. You see these sculptures, so you go, "Well, someone can do it."
I always think with that, it's like they did it so well, you know, 500 years ago. Like, maybe just leave it. You're never going to get that good.
That's the point.
Well, they apprenticed for something like 25, 30 years before they actually.
Yeah, I think Bernini was
trusted
actually
with something of their own.
Dad was a marble carver. Like, I think he was doing it since he was a little kid.
Fair play.
So
he had a bit of a head start.
Yeah.
I wonder, is there a museum of like crap Renaissance sculptures of people that couldn't do it very well? So they do you know what I mean?
That would be really good.
Like things that I would try and go, no, I'm going to tear that up, and someone says no. And in 400 years, 500 years from now, it'll be interesting to see how you screwed it up.
Here's a room of Michelangelo fuck-ups.
Yeah. So do you do a lot of, you know, life scans of people now, and
starting to? It's
instead of
becoming
a
more
life
of a
cast,
thing.
or
Yes. Yeah.
and then you sculpt onto that to do the prosthetics.
Yes. Well, there's two different ways, because we did a makeup together, because I was we wrote an article about it because it was the first time I'd done it. We had a 10-day window to sculpt this makeup. So yeah, I had a scan done and then sent the data to Todd to clean up, because the scan isn't perfect because it's optically, you know, tracking the image. There's always
But
little
it had
bits,
a lot of holes.
where
right,
it doesn't get the data, and then you fill that in. And then so the idea of the scan data is you could then you could either 3D print the cores, or you could shrink them slightly or modify them to make the pieces tight. So if you're making a mask, for example, you can make the head slightly smaller, so that when the mask goes on, it's a tight fit. It's not baggy and loose.
Oh, cool.
And things like that. But what I'm interested in is how, like, if you're scanning somebody, like you could have an actor and you could scan them and you can see that it's them, but often they don't look like them because they're holding still, like a life cast. It's that kind of Victorian portrait kind of stoic thing. But then when you sculpt somebody, you're capturing them, you're putting something in them in it.
Yeah.
And I have this kind of tussle in my head between, you know, the scanning something for the sort of perfunctory act of acquiring their likeness in the most efficient, realistic way, and whether that's okay. So we don't need to sculpt now. It's like, but no, because it doesn't look right, and it's not the same as sculpting. There's something about the creating of something from nothing that's the thing. And if you take that, it's kind of like photographs do a good job of rendering people, but if you can paint somebody, that's an incredible thing. And there's something, as a human being, there's something really valuable in being able to do it,
right?
Because you observe, because if you're making something from scratch, you've really got to,
I think the more a human being has had to do with it, the more human feeling it's going to have in it, compared to just a machine or a life caster.
Yes, because it's purely just data. It doesn't mean anything, and it needs that human twist.
That's one of the things I like about a really well done caricature, because not only does it capture the likeness of an individual, but it gets an aspect of personality that may not be coming through in the likeness.
Yeah, especially if they're well-known personalities, because they're not just doing one face. Do you know what I mean? If you like Jim Carrey, for example, you know, he does lots of different things, and he can make you feel a certain way by his expressions. So you could sculpt different portraits of the same person, and it would be different kind of thing.
Yeah.
Expressions are an interesting thing to do, because what those in the Taranti window, they used to have they still have that, the Messerschmitt sculptures of the guy pulling extreme faces and stuff, and that's a good exercise to do, I suppose. Do you enjoy doing?
Yeah, I mean, I do a lot of smiles, obviously, smiles are interesting because the difference between a genuine smile and a kind of, someone's taken too long to take the photos, sort of half dropped
Richter's
grimacing smile is really subtle sometimes, and trying to actually infuse your smile with genuine warmth is just a million little things that you're just trying to pick out of the photos that you like of the smile.
Yeah,
and that's the magic aspect and beyond the mechanical.
Yeah, exactly. Like, you can't, I don't think you could really do a good scan of someone smiling. Maybe, I don't know. I'm not.
Well, you could, but there's still something about it that's just, it feels like a capture of something rather than a rendering of something. Do you know what I mean? There's something that you add to it. You're not just a facilitator, like, if somebody else scanned it, we get the same thing. It's kind of like portrait photography. A good photographer it's not just about, it's working with the subject to create something that you want. And there was that interesting, I saw a video on YouTube, and there was a guy that they had, and they told different photographers a different story about this person. One person said, he was a convicted murderer or something, and he'd been released and he's kind of rehabilitated. Somebody else was told that he'd saved somebody's life. Someone else was told that he was a surgeon. Someone else was told that he was a swindler. And so they all had a different version of events, and they all took their portraits based on what they knew, and then they had all the portraits lined up. Then they brought the guy in, and they told all of them all of that was bullshit. But it's interesting how what you thought you knew about. So that was an interesting thing, and I think that's definitely the case with sculpture. It's like you want to be familiar enough with the act of sculpting that the business of that doesn't get in the way of your decision making, which is where I'm at with ZBrush, because I get distracted by the mechanism of it, that it's clunky.
One of the students at Falmouth is unable to recognize faces.
Oh yeah, I've heard about that.
And she's working on a project, and she's wonderful. She makes these absolutely gorgeous infant sculptures that they're magnificent. Anyway, she's in the MA program, and she's got the project she's working on right now is a likeness of Morgan Freeman as a lion, and the likeness is spot on.
Yeah, it's really good. Isn't
it? And I think her inability to recognize faces removes any preconceptions she has, so that she is going just on what she sees, not on anything else. And it has to help. I'm terrible at likenesses. I'd love to get good at likenesses, but
that's really interesting.
She has completely nailed Morgan Freeman.
Because I think it's such an easy trap to fall into sculpting what you expect something to look like, rather than actually looking and observing and being really honest about what it does look like. That's something you just got to learn through just trying to be. Is it subjective or objective? I always get confused.
Objective is when you see it without influence, kind of thing.
That.
But you, like you were saying, like if you had to do a portrait of somebody that you didn't like or you'd heard something, you know, then it's like that's like a figure of history, for example. You know, not somebody, you know, like, but you might have to do, I don't know, Mussolini or something, and you might go, oh, I'm not keen on his politics. So, but you want to do a good job of sculpting them, and it's that thing of like your emotional, for want of a better word, attachment to it can influence things. Well, I think doing portraits of loved ones is quite hard in a way, because the idea of doing something, you know, somebody you know very well, either because you're forced to look at it very sort of systematically, and what if they don't like what you've done, and you know what I mean? It's quite a loaded thing to do.
Yeah, I've sculpted a few people that are just like, I hate it, and it's really like, oh no. I just don't do people that. I mean, I've sculpted Ben, my husband, because he loves it. He's totally not kind of vain or worried about it either. But I remember when I was first learning, I sculpted a friend, and I was like, ta-da! And she was like, oh, I could tell she just absolutely hated it.
Is that really changing room's face?
Yeah. It's like, oh no, I've never
smile
ever
goes from
sculpted someone I
genuine
know. Yeah.
Oh gosh.
Yeah.
That's awkward.
But yeah, I get people write to me all the time like, oh, you know, I've had a family member that I lost, could you sculpt them? And it's like, I can't anyway, because I'm busy with my paid work, but I just wouldn't want to do that sort of work, because it's so personal what you feel like a person should look like. It would be so hard to ever
pedestal.
Yeah, exactly.
Yeah.
And that when you know them so well, and to get a complete stranger to sculpt a likeness from like a couple of pictures, it's never going to live up to what you'd want it to look like. So I stay clear of that sort of work.
Yeah. I think that's the beauty of like the sculpting is what you bring to it, you know. It's like, it's very hard, because like you say, is how do people feel about that? It's like, oh, where does that come from? I have to think about that with sculpting, like, where does it come from? I mean, that's the difference between that mechanical thing of like measuring this, okay, that's this long, I put that in here, I mark it, I can do that whether I feel like it or not. But there are certain things that come from a different part of your brain. It's like, I don't know, like the example I've used in the past is like, you can wash up no matter how you feel, but if you had to write, I don't know, for a friend's funeral, if you had to write something for them, you'd have to be in the right frame of mind to say the right thing. So it's pulling on a different thing. And sculpture is a mixture of the two. It's like, isn't it? There's the mechanical aspect of measuring and plotting and all that, and then there's this, we said before, like decision-making side of things. And I don't know where that comes from, and I'm worried it'll abandon me.
I think just so much of it is practice, and you have to do it a billion times to get better at it. And you can't expect to sculpt one portrait and be like, that's it, I've nailed portrait sculpting, I'm going to be just can sculpt any portrait now, because you're learning all the time. Every single time you sculpt something, like, oh, I've never noticed that before, or you know, oh, I'll bear that in mind for the next one, sort of thing.
Do you find like you teach people here?
I did once do a class here, but it's really the wrong shape, this studio, because it's long and thin.
Right.
I can't really get many people around a model, so it's not really possible, but it's something, you know, I might do in the future. But at the moment I'm just focusing on these online courses.
The thing about teaching people that I found, and I think this is useful for people who are interested in learning how to sculpt, is that I believe, and I may be wrong in this, but I believe, generally speaking, there is an impulsive I want it now thing more than there was. And more people find it, I say more people find it harder. That's not very good English, but you know, it feels like there's a resistance to subject yourself to the difficulty necessary to get better at a lot of things.
Right.
Because I think there's so many things that you can get immediate gratification from, and I wish to rally against that, and I wish to encourage other people to push back
something
against
that. Granted, there are times when you need to be able to sculpt quickly to meet deadlines, but I don't think in general sculpture is something that should be approached as a sprint. It's a marathon.
Yeah.
It's so weird though, isn't it? Because I was listening to your talk you did on this with Neil Gorton, and he said a lot of interesting stuff about how people see these videos on YouTube and it just all looks really easy, and they're really like, you know, disappointed when things don't happen really easily. And it's I think it's difficult for our generation to know what it's like to grow up with all that information, because it was really, really hard to find out about this stuff when we were growing up. You know, like my dad's a teacher, my mum's a social worker, nothing to do with art. Like, I wanted to do art so much, and it was so hard won, this information, like to find out how, you know, I wanted to work on movies, I wanted to learn to sculpt, but to find stuff out was really hard. There's no books in the library on it. There's no, like, there's no YouTube or anything.
No one was coming to you with the information.
No,
you had to go and really dig out and find it.
And it looked impossibly hard. Like, you just couldn't even imagine how you could ever do any of this stuff.
Yeah.
But now it's like the opposite. Everyone's sharing what they do. It looks really easy, but they don't see the 20, 30 years before that of like having to find out how to do it and practicing. And it's really, really hard to get good at anything, and requires an enormous amount of effort.
A great many students today, want instant gratification. You know, they feel a certain entitlement.
But the thing is, they do find that instant gratification in so many things nowadays, which you didn't have access to when we were kids, and that's why. So it's not really their fault. It's more a point of trying to bring people's attention to push back against that urge to find that everywhere, because you're not supposed to. Things aren't supposed to be easy, I don't think, because you don't value any of that.
Well, if it was easy, anybody could do it, and there wouldn't be anything special about doing it.
Yes, it's like the economy. You know what I mean? Like, you know, if you flood the economy with lots of money, then money has no value, so everything goes up.
Exactly.
Do you know what I mean?
Yeah.
So, and you can't really understand that because it's quite a complicated process. But
that doesn't negate the fact that they still want it now. They feel that they've paid for the course. They should just give me the skill.
Yeah,
why should I have to work for it? I've paid for it. You're the tutor. Give me that. Give me what I've paid for.
Yeah.
Well,
you can't
doesn't work that way.
Information into someone's brain. You've still got to do the learning. I always think the phrase self-taught is kind of interesting, because it's like, really, everyone is self-taught. No one else can do the learning for you. You have to do the learning yourself. Like, you can show someone something, you can, you know, take the horse to water, but you can't make it drink. You can't give someone ability, and you can't do something the first time you do it. You have to just have that repetition and that self-discipline and obsession, really, to get good at anything.
Yeah. You got to love it enough, I think, to be prepared to go through that difficulty.
Yeah.
That's the thing. But there is always difficulty. And I think the curse is that people have been sold a lie that there's a way that you can do it without the difficulty.
Yeah, there will be pain involved.
In everything.
Just accept
in anything worth
just
doing.
Accept it.
It's this whole tricks and tips thing. It's like, there aren't really any tricks and tips.
Yeah.
It's like...
just be really good at sculpting.
That's my tip.
Really hard.
Yeah.
But what I would say is, anyone can get better at sculpting, but it just takes time, practice, and, you know,
more practice.
Read all the books, watch all the videos, listen to anyone that work that you like, go and do short courses. You know, you're not going to get everything from a college course. You know, everyone I know has done a bit here, a bit there, gathered, you know, you don't get all your learning from one place. You get it from making yourself be around people that are better than you, and, you know, learning from people that you admire. I've learnt just as much working as I ever did in any college course or anything, because, you know, just watching other people that are better than you is the best way of learning, isn't it? That's my rant.
Oh my God, that was fun.
That was so cool. We just came out a little bit starstruck and dazzled. It was amazing. We had a really, really nice chat.
Amelia Rowcroft is everything we hoped she would be, and then some.
So in the description there'll be some links to her online workshops, which are absolutely worth every penny. They're amazing, so you must check those out. I don't really know what else to say. I'm a bit overwhelmed with it all. It's fantastic.
Yeah, no, and the village where she lives and the scenery around it, I'm gawking at everything. White cliffs and water. It's lovely.
Lewes and Sussex. Quite taken with it, aren't you?
Yeah, I am. Narrow streets. You can see from some of the images we'll post on this. But
So, well, guys, thank you very much for listening. We appreciate your ears and your time. And as ever, if you wish to get in touch with us, you can email us at stuartandtodd@gmail.com.
or leave us a voice message on the website, battleswithbitsofrubber.com. And we'll see you soon. Bye.
You can get in touch through our Facebook page or email us at stuartandtodd@gmail.com. Check the show notes for more information. If you enjoyed this episode, tell someone else and help us grow by sharing it on social media. Thanks for listening.
Screw in the Tragus. That'd be a great name for a band.